Hey there, good morning. Today I'm going to talk about working with parents. And I would say, in all of my experience providing play therapy training and consulting, and this, what I'm going to say, comes up a lot in Play Therapy Academy, which is my online play therapy consultation program. There are a couple of things. One thing is that not sure what to do in sessions. The other thing is not sure how to make sense of what is going on in the play therapy session. The third thing that I hear a lot, and these aren't in any rank order, the three that I'm mentioning here, is working with parents and how to get the most engagement from parents in the play therapy process. And usually, what I find is it's one or more of the things that I want to talk about today. And so today I'm going to talk about four things that are usually part of the problem when you're not getting that engagement from parents that you really need to get. Um, and engagement, I'm not so that can vary depending on what you need. So are they going to be in the sessions? Are they going to not be in sessions? Are you going to meet with them separately? How are you making those decisions? That's all part of the process of figuring out how to get the most engagement from parents. And by the end of this, I'm going to talk a little bit more also about a new course that I'm launching that it's already available based on my 30 years experience in the child and adolescent field, working with children and their families. And over the last 15 years, there's a lot of things that I have found that play therapists are doing that get in the way of getting the engagement that you want to get. So I go into that in a lot more in depth in my new online course, partnering with parents and getting grounded, partnering with parents in play therapy. So I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end if you're interested and you want a lot more support than you can get in a 30-minute live stream. There is help available. I'll talk a little bit about Play Therapy Academy and I'll talk a little bit about this new course. So let's get into it. Today's topic is why aren't parents engaging in play therapy? So it's usually one of the four things, at least one or more of the four things that I'm going to talk about today. So if you're watching, I would love to know who's here. Post your name in the comments, where you're from, what population you work with. If you're watching on the live stream replay, I would still love to know who's watching, where you're from, what population you work with. It's always nice to connect with people around the world, see what people are doing. And if you have questions, please feel free to post questions. The only thing that I would ask is don't post specific client questions or talk about specific clients because it is a public format and we don't want to, we still want to make sure we're protecting client privacy. So, and if you're watching, listening on the podcast, feel free to make a comment. If you guys find this information helpful, I would love it if you would share the information with your colleagues, if you would subscribe to my YouTube channel, click that notification button on my podcast, if you would leave a comment, and that would be awesome. So let's get started. Number one of the things that you really need to think about, and I would say just kind of take a minute to yourself, think about, are you communicating your expectations to parents about their involvement in the play therapy process? And First, you have to figure out what your expectations are so that you can communicate those to parents. And I think one of the things that I've learned over the last 30 plus years, and I honestly, I learned this through a lot of mistakes, um, and is really to identify what your expectations are. Because if you don't know what your expectations are, it's kind of like you're fumbling your way through and just doing what everybody else does. That's what I did. I just did what everybody else did, and it didn't work for me. That's what I realized. What worked for everybody else didn't work for me. And the reality is, it might not have been working for everybody else. It's just we were all thinking everybody else is doing it. This must be the way to do it. And that's not necessarily true, but you're not going to know unless you identify what are your expectations for parents in the process. Because once you identify your expectations for parents and their role in the treatment process, then you need to communicate that to them. Because what happens if you don't communicate it, that's when the frustration comes up. And it might likely be because you don't know what your expectations are. And you don't know what your expectations are until you start getting really frustrated and irritated. And then when you take a step back, you can figure out what are you frustrated about and why? Why are you frustrated about that? Is it a matter of you not communicating? Or is it a matter of you have communicated, you've been really clear, and then it's still not getting um, done the way that you know that it needs to be done, which those are two different directions that you're going to go in. First and foremost, though, you have to know what your expectations are and you have to communicate those. Because parents, if you don't communicate that, they're not going to know. How are we expecting parents to know how the process works? You're the expert. Whether or not you feel like the expert is a different matter. Parents view you as the expert. And in fact, you are. You have more, typically you have more knowledge and experience than parents, which is why they're coming to you to get help. And so they're needing you to help them understand how this works. I think in the mental health field, we forget a lot because it's our day to day, all day long, every day for years. We are in the mental health field. We know how it works. I think we forget a lot that our clients don't. And if they've not been in therapy before, or maybe they were with a therapist that did things differently, I think it's important for us to really, from the very beginning, communicate what our expectations are. And that will help to reduce a lot of frustration. It won't fix everything because even though you communicate them, you're still going to have to navigate that process with clients. But at least you would have communicated that from the beginning and they would have understood, hey, this is how it works. And when you start kind of challenging a little bit, therapeutically challenging, then they would have already had that conversation with you about, yeah, this is how it works. So the second thing is that keeps parents from really partnering with you in the change process is not having a strong therapeutic rapport with parents. So this one is really related to number one, which is if you don't communicate your expectations, then and you don't identify your expectations, then it's going to be hard to put that into place. But that's not always the case. Sometimes we have clients that are from very challenging family systems. So these are the higher acuity families. So by my mouth's not working. Higher acuity, what we're talking about is These are family systems that typically have generational histories of trauma, attachment problems, addiction, poverty, histories of that. Um, and they don't really know how the process works. Plus, they probably have a lot of their own wounds that get activated, and they're not sure and how to do this healing thing. It's scary. Think about it. Healing means change, and change can be painful. And so, if we're engaging parents in the change process and they have some pretty significant histories of their own, which you would have found out about in your initial psychosocial assessment to do your case conceptualization, if you've listened to any of my previous podcasts or live stream episodes, this is something that I talk about a lot, case conceptualization. And this is really important. I'm going to talk a little bit about that today as well when you're working with parents. So in my course, I do go over case conceptualization. I like using a neuroscience and attachment lens to do that case conceptualization. And I also find that regardless, this is my opinion, regardless of your play therapy model, you can always look at it and integrate in a neuroscience and attachment lens to that to understand it. So I think that's an important part, and we're going to talk about that. But here's the thing: if you are not developing that therapeutic rapport, if you have clients with parents who have pretty significant histories of trauma, attachment, maybe some addiction in the family system or parents' family or parents' history, maybe poverty, any of those types of things that you would have gathered in your initial assessment, that'll give you a good idea of the level of acuity that you are dealing with within this family system, and that then becomes part of your treatment planning and problem solving. The thing is, though, if you don't have that therapeutic rapport, if you don't build that trust with parents, then it's going to be hard to facilitate the change process. Parents aren't going to make the hard changes that you're asking them to make if they don't feel like they can trust you, if they worry about you judging them, or they're convinced you're judging them and thinking they're horrible parents. Whether or not you think that, that's what they think. And so part of that trust building is helping parents understand that you're not judging them, that you're there to support them as much as their child, and they are the key to their child's success. So that's what we work toward when we're working with parents, and that takes time to do that. And so helping parents trust you is key. To do that, you need to have a dedicated time. I've talked about that before on these live streams. I talk about this all the time in Play Therapy Academy, how we have these discussions. In fact, the course that I created, I got a lot of feedback from people in Play Therapy Academy who are going to be getting the course. So a lot of what's in the course talks a lot about the things that play therapists struggle with. One of them is building that rapport with parents and having a dedicated time to meet with them. How are you figuring out how parents are going to be involved? That case conceptualization and treatment planning process is very important. So first, you have to establish the trust. Then you can work on the change process based on what you've conceptualized, but you can't do that until you first have that trust built with them. That brings me to my third thing, which I think people don't often think about. If you've listened to any of my previous live stream episodes or now even my podcast episodes, you would have heard me talked about imposter syndrome. I think this isn't something we talk about much in the play therapy field. And I think it's important for us to talk about because who of us, especially in the beginning when we're learning, has never felt like a big giant imposter? We all feel that way, especially in the beginning. Anytime you're learning something new or experiencing something that you've not felt like you've mastered, you're going to feel a bit like an imposter. You know your imposter syndrome is kicked in when you start having these critical thoughts in your head about, oh, I don't know what I'm doing. And any day now, parents are going to figure it out, and they're probably going to pull their child from treatment because I'm a big giant failure and I don't know what I'm doing. And then what happens is when your imposter syndrome kicks in, then you start making decisions more about accommodating and pleasing, such as trying to please them or justify play therapy or do things you're not really comfortable doing because you don't think it's the best way to go about accomplishing the outcomes that parents want, but you do it because you don't want them to be upset or mad or figure out that you're an imposter. Then you know your imposter syndrome has kicked in, and then that becomes part of the problem because it impairs your decision making, and then it becomes more about your anxiety than about addressing the issues. And I know that seems harsh, and I don't mean that to be harsh because we have all been there. I have been there. I get it. There's no judgment here. But here's the thing, if you don't recognize it and you don't come to terms with it, then it's going to interfere with your success rate. That is just a given. I don't want to say it's a fact because sometimes it's not always that way. It's just from experience. I know this to be true. A lot of what we talk about in Play Therapy Academy is accomplishing skills and building confidence so your imposter syndrome doesn't kick in. And we do this a lot around working with parents, which is why I took a lot of time in this course that I created to really walk you through a lot of things to help you figure out what needs to happen to develop your confidence level, to be able to feel like you are making a difference and engaging parents. So be aware of your imposter syndrome and when that kicks in. That's a biggie. That's one I don't think we think about very much, but it is an important thing to figure out when your imposter syndrome has kicked in. So the fourth and final thing that I wanted to talk about today, and I've kind of mentioned it here and there throughout the live stream episode today, which is weak case conceptualization and treatment planning. What do I mean by case conceptualization? So if you're interested in this topic, I talk about this a lot in a lot of my previous live streams. So you may want to pop over to my YouTube channel, which is Kathy Spooner Renewing Hearts Training. You can pop over there, click on the live tab, and you'll see all my replays. And there are a bunch over there. And you can also listen to my podcast, which is Next Level Play Therapy. So if you like podcasts, you can listen to podcasts. Right now, I think most of the discussions about case conceptualization are over on my live stream channel, over on YouTube. So, but in a nutshell, here's what case conceptualization means. Basically, case conceptualization is figuring out what are the roots of the problem and why is it happening. So what are the patterns that are sustaining this problem? And then that influences your treatment planning. And so really that first session where you're doing that psychosocial assessment, and if you want to take a deeper dive on this, I have a course on that as well. So you should probably pop over to my website at rhplaytherapytraining.com, click on the courses page if you really want to take a deeper look into that. But one of the things that you need to think about is for your case conceptualization, based on all that information you've gathered for your psychosocial assessment, what's the role of parents in the problem and part of the solution? So this is going to vary depending on the acuity level of parents. So the higher acuity parents are probably engaging in some maladaptive parenting strategies, predominantly because you can't pass on what you didn't receive. Meaning, if parents didn't get effective parenting, then they probably are not sure how to pass that along to their child, which is, again, why strong therapeutic rapport with parents is needed so that you can support them and help them make those changes. First, though, you have to figure out their role in the change process. You're looking at that acuity level to figure out how they need to be involved in that change process. And that's part of your clinical decision making, because ultimately you want to help parents engage as therapeutic agents of change for their child. But they're not going to know what that is. And that's why you have to help them figure that out. But in order to do that, you need to understand what the problem is and how to help them engage in that change process for their child to be that therapeutic agent of change. And so once you've kind of gotten a good idea of some of the patterns and what's activating problems and how are parents responding to that, what are the patterns in the family system that need to be addressed that might be contributing to what you're seeing going on with the child, then that influences your treatment planning. Your treatment planning is basically, what am I going to do and how am I going to do it? Both of these are influenced by your play therapy model. So whatever your theoretical model is going to influence how you conceptualize what the problem is and how are you going to address the problems. So your treatment planning also identifies what are some obstacles that might come up along the way. And so you're thinking about all of those things. So from the get-go, it's a good idea, because here's the thing. Here's something I see happens a lot. Play therapists are not sure what to do. So they just kind of have parents in the sessions for a variety of reasons, but there's no plan, there's no reason. So it's kind of confusing for parents. It's kind of confusing for play therapists because you're not sure what the purpose is. They don't know what their role is. So this is why your case conceptualization and your treatment planning is really important. All right, so that is it for today. Let me just do a recap. For today, what we're talking about is why aren't parents engaging as your partner in that play therapy change process? First thing you want to think about is, what are your expectations and how are you communicating those expectations to parents? Parents aren't going to understand what their role is in the change process if you don't know what it is, then they're not going to know what it is. And if you know what it is, you need to communicate it to them so that they know what it is. That doesn't mean everything is magically going to be fixed. And it has set the tone at the very beginning to help them understand how this works with you. And that's your responsibility to communicate that to them. Sometimes it takes a while. It took me a while to figure out what mine were. And mostly I figured that out by a lot of mistakes. So that's one of the things in the course I try to kind of walk you through that so you don't have to take as long as I did to figure it out. The next thing is having weak therapeutic rapport. So if you're finding that parents aren't making the changes, maybe you're doing those quick check-ins at the end of the sessions with parents, which I don't really think are very effective. I've talked about that a few times. But if you're doing that and they're not making the changes, then it's probably because you need to spend more time with them and have more of a dedicated parenting session approach to build rapport with parents so that they trust you and they believe that you actually do not judge them and think they're terrible parents. But that takes time and that takes conversations with them to help them understand that you really don't feel that way because they feel that way. I mean, it's hard bringing your child because it means you're not doing something. You somehow have failed your child. Well, part of the trust process with parents is helping to support them. I mean, this is called being a human being. That's how I look at it. Parenting is hard and life is hard. So and especially if you're higher acuity from a higher acuity family system, then you can't give away what you haven't received and you need support. And I am a strong believer that as play therapists, we need to be supporting parents as much as we are supporting their child so that parents trust us to make those hard changes that are scary and overwhelming with their child. And that will hopefully reduce all the kind of crisis calls in between sessions because now you're getting parents to come to meet with you for a consistent and dedicated period of time, and you're building that change process foundation with them. But they're not going to do that if they don't feel like they have trust with you. They're not going to build trust with you until you spend time with them, and it needs to be dedicated time. So that kind of also ties into what are your expectations and how are you going to go about doing that. The third thing I find is imposter syndrome. So imposter syndrome makes you feel like you're the worst play therapist. You don't know what you're doing. You're a big old fraud. And at any moment in time, parents are going to figure it out. And if your client fails, it's because you have been a giant failure. And now it's going to be exposed for all the world to see. The thing is, if you don't recognize your imposter syndrome, it's going to interfere with your decision making because most likely you'll end up doing some people pleasing, some over accommodating, doing things that you're not really comfortable because you really don't think they're the best way to go about addressing the issue, but you'll do it because you don't want parents to be upset. Well, you're the expert. And so your job is to help them understand how the process works. And that's your job. How you do that requires the ability to have trust with parents. So that's where that trust comes in. But you also have to understand what your expectations are. So you can see how number 1 and number 2 will also help with number 3, which is imposter syndrome. And then the fourth thing is, and I think this is something that gets lost a lot as well. I have found this come up when I do trainings and also in Play Therapy Academy, we talk about this a lot, which is the thing that interferes with engaging parents as your partners is weak case conceptualization and treatment planning, meaning you haven't figured out what parents' role is in the problem as well as part of the solution. And it will vary. We have our case conceptualization is really based on that initial assessment that we did with parents to get a sense of the child and the system in which the child exists. And that system is a multi-generational system. So looking at it that way will help you get a better sense of family patterns and what's going on. And the higher acuity family systems are going to need a much stronger approach to provide the support needed to facilitate the change. And so part of that is like we've all had the lower acuity parents or children from lower acuity family systems. These are the pretty high functioning. They're really literate about emotions and understanding that. They're really good about tuning in to their child's needs and reading their cues. These are the lower acuity um, family systems, and these are the easier ones to work with. But we all get anywhere on the spectrum, on the continuum of low acuity to high acuity. So you really need to use your case conceptualization to figure out where they are with that. And so that is going to influence your treatment planning. You're going to go about things in a much more dedicated way, maybe teaching some skills, maybe building a lot of rapport, time to build that. Trust takes time. And so, how much time are you going to need in order to build trust? That's all part of your initial assessment and figuring out your case conceptualization, because that's going to help you figure out the role of parents in the change process for each one of your clients. And then once you figure out their role, then you're helping them to become that therapeutic agent of change for their child. That is influenced by your treatment planning. Your treatment planning is how you're going to go about doing that, which again comes back to your expectations. How are you building rapport? And is your imposter syndrome getting activated? So these all really do tie together, but they are separate things. So I did want to highlight each one of those. Hopefully, this has kind of provided some really good information to help you engage parents more effectively. If you're finding you need some more support, though, maybe you need to take a deeper dive into looking at what's going on. I do have a new course. It's called Getting Grounded, Partnering with Parents in Play Therapy. So this is an online course that you can take in your time zone when it's convenient for you. There are 6 modules that walk you through the process. And so I kind of look at this course as taking my 30 plus years of experience and putting it into a course. So it's kind of like you get to look inside my brain and get some strategies and tips about how to do this. So I like using a neuroscience and attachment lens. This course does the case conceptualization process using a neuroscience and attachment lens. So it's heavily attachment focused. And I believe you can use that lens with any specific play therapy model that you're using. And so it kind of walks through that case conceptualization using that attachment lens with neuroscience and understanding that to help you figure out what to look for in the dynamics of parents and their children, so you can get a better sense of that case conceptualization of what are the patterns that are sustained, and then using that in your treatment planning process. I also walk you through kind of figuring out your expectations. I give some really practical tips on how to engage parents, how to overcome some of those obstacles that come up. And there's a whole module on working with reluctant parents. How do you engage those higher acuity parents that are a little more reluctant to engage in the change process? And then there's a bonus module. I figured if I'm going to provide a course about working with parents, I should make it thorough. Plus, I got all this feedback from people in Play Therapy Academy. These were the things that they struggle with and need help with. So I put it all in there. There's a bonus module on tips for working with parents who are in high conflict divorce situations. So it's not the therapy part of it of working with the children. It's more about, here's some things you need to keep in mind to navigate all those challenges that come up. These are some strategies to think about, to implement. And then I also put in a bonus, another bonus in there about some templates with letters and policies and procedures when you're working with high conflict divorce family systems, some recommendations for, because I get asked for them all the time. So I thought I will put the templates in the course to access those as well. So if you're interested in that course, Getting Grounded, Partnering with Parents in Play Therapy, you'll want to head over to my website. My website is rhplaytherapytraining.com. Click on the courses page, and then you'll find, just kind of scroll till you find the course, which is Getting Grounded, Partnering with Parents in Play Therapy. So if you need more support, meaning you really need some more support, feeling confident and developing your play therapy skills, I do have Play Therapy Academy. Play Therapy Academy is my online, I call it my VIP-like experience for providing tons of support for play therapists who want to take your play therapy skills to the next level. So in Play Therapy Academy, I have 2 cohorts. There's a Saturday group and a Wednesday group. We meet twice a month. There's dedicated schedule about case presentations. It's very structured and ordered, but flexible enough that my goal was for you to get the most you can out of using the benefit of my 30 years experience, plus all the wisdom, knowledge, and experience and insights of your colleagues. So we usually have some really insightful, in-depth conversations in our group consultation meetings. In addition to those twice monthly group consultation meetings that are online, all of the Getting Grounded in Play Therapy courses are included in Play Therapy Academy. So all of those courses are available for people who are not in Play Therapy Academy. So maybe you don't need the consultation support, but for those people who need it, the courses are also included. So in Play Therapy Academy, this course is going to be included in Play Therapy Academy. And then in addition to all of the courses that are all online, you can take them when it's convenient, and the group consultation calls, we have a group chat where we can get support. I'm pretty active in those. Group members are pretty active in those. So there's a lot of support in between those group consultation calls. Plus there's some other benefits as well. But that is essentially Play Therapy Academy. If you're interested in Play Therapy Academy, then you will want to schedule a free 30-minute video call with me. We can talk more about it. I have a couple of openings, and I have 2 openings in each group at this point in time. When those are full, they're full. So schedule that with me if you need some more support. If you just need the courses, pop over to my website at rhplaytherapytraining.com/courses. You'll see all of those there, and I will see you next time. Oh, and all the links are in the comments, so you can find those. If you're on Instagram, just pop over to my bio and click on the link in my bio. All right, I will see you next time.